The skylines of Bengaluru, Hyderabad, and Pune are increasingly defined by ultra-modern corporate campuses expanding at a relentless pace. By fiscal year 2026, over 2,100 of these operational centers will be active in India, accounting for 38% of all commercial office leasing across the country's top 7 cities. This physical footprint supports a workforce of 2.4 million STEM professionals. Economically, this specific sector represents a $100 billion industry. But despite that $100 billion scale, these entities have absolutely zero external customers. They do not sell to the public. These organizations operate with no sales teams, no client acquisition targets, and no external marketing budgets. This is the Global Capability Center, or GCC. It is a wholly owned captive offshore subsidiary designed to perform work exclusively for its own multinational parent company. Under this business-to-parent model, the subsidiary's entire book of business is guaranteed by the internal demand of the parent corporation. Unlike a traditional third-party outsourcing vendor, the parent company maintains total ownership and operational control over the talent, the data, and the intellectual property. Understanding how this insular system survives requires decoding the financial engineering that allows it to operate without a market, and why Fortune 2000 companies are increasingly shifting their most critical work away from third-party providers and into these captive hubs. A global capability center functions as a highly structured internal cost center. It exists to provide the same services as an external vendor, but at the parent's actual cost of operation. The budget allocation is weighted heavily toward people. Between 60 and 70% of total spend goes directly to salaries and benefits for the local talent pool. The remaining 30 to 40% is split between Grade A office facilities, technology infrastructure, and local governance. The parent company funds these specific operational costs through ongoing capital injections. In exchange, the GCC delivers capabilities, software engineering hours, data analytics, or machine learning models directly back to the global business lines. But because the parent and subsidiary are legally related, they cannot trade money and services across borders without meeting strict regulatory standards. They must adhere to the arm's length principle, the global standard for how related corporate entities must price their internal transactions. Tax authorities require the GCC to invoice its parent at the same rate an unrelated third-party vendor would charge for the same work. To comply, the center uses cost-plus transfer pricing. The GCC bills the parent for its exact operational costs, then adds a mandatory markup to create a taxable profit. This statutory markup typically ranges between 8 and 15%. This creates a modest profit on the subsidiary's books to satisfy local tax law, though the entity is not intended to maximize returns independently. By leveraging high-skill talent in lower-cost geographic hubs, the GCC model aims to reduce the parent company's global operating baseline by 30 to 40% compared to keeping that same work in the home market. Maintaining those savings requires navigating a complex legal landscape. Offshore captive centers are not simple satellite offices. They are distinct legal entities with high compliance requirements. The pressure is constant. Transfer pricing audits are the #1 regulatory priority for 81% of GCC leaders. The most significant structural threat to the model is permanent establishment, or PE risk.
This risk is triggered if parent company executives exert too much direct control over local operations, effectively bypassing the subsidiary's local governance. If PE status is triggered, local tax authorities can reclassify the multinational parent company as having a taxable presence in the host country. This can make the parent company liable for local corporate taxes, often up to 40%, on its global profits, an outcome that can negate the center's original cost advantage. To prevent this, companies must maintain separate local boards and follow formal incorporation protocols, like India's Spice Plus portal. All foreign capital inflows must be documented under the Foreign Exchange Management Act to avoid penalties. Additionally, centers must adhere to evolving data protection rules and zero-trust security architectures to protect the global parent's data. These layers of tax and legal exposure form a structural moat. They protect mature GCCs from newer competitors who may not have the institutional scale to manage such high-stakes compliance. The early days of offshoring were defined by routine data entry. Today, these centers are designing microchips and building end-to-end AI pipelines. This industry began in the 1990s as GCC 1.0. The focus was pure cost arbitrage, moving routine back-office transactions to locations with lower labor costs. We are now in the GCC 3.0 era. These centers have evolved into high-value R&D hubs that own critical business functions. GCC 3.0s manage everything from cybersecurity operations centers to deep machine learning and strategic financial analysis. This evolution forces a build versus buy decision. Why would a company take on the legal risks of a GCC when they could simply hire a third-party IT vendor? Using a vendor means paying an external markup, but it also creates a divide between the teams building the product and the company that owns the brand. A GCC alleviates that divide. It provides total control over hiring, culture, and intellectual property, keeping institutional knowledge inside the company. Because GCC teams are embedded directly into global product squads, the transition of work across time zones is more seamless. Unlike vendors who work across multiple clients, a captive workforce is fully aligned with the current's proprietary tools and internal standards. GCC 3.0 represents a shift to capability arbitrage. In this model, the ability to protect IP and accelerate product velocity is a primary driver of investment. In a modern enterprise architecture, a mature GCC is no longer an external service provider. It functions as an integrated internal organ of the parent company. Traditional vendor relationships are transactional. A GCC is bound to headquarters through shared security protocols, mirrored IT stacks, and a single corporate culture. Through dual reporting, local leaders sit on global councils. At peak maturity, the portfolio hub, this center assumes end-to-end ownership over global business lines. This creates an advantage that is difficult to replicate. The unique combination of sunk infrastructural investment and years of institutional knowledge makes these centers core to the parent's operations. To sustain this, companies must continuously adapt to local labor codes and data localization mandates. The cumulative strength of the employer brand and internal talent pipelines means that once a center matures, it becomes a permanent asset that is slow and expensive for competitors to challenge. The trajectory of the modern multinational is increasingly defined by these internal capability engines, which allow companies to scale critical innovations without the compromises of the open outsourcing market.